So my name is Chris. I'm a native New Yorker. I got into powerlifting back in 2014, but competed in 2015. It's a guy from my gym. As most young men get introduced to a lot of things, it's just some other guy in the gym is fucking badass. He's lifting weights. He's doing it with ease. He looks like an Adonis, and you're like, holy shit, I want to be like him. So I approached him one time and said, how did you get to do all this? I mean, the man was squatting 500 pounds, pressing over 300, deadlifting 6. And I was just like, that's so cool. And at the time, I had just graduated from college and finished running track, so I was a scrawny little kid. And I was like, oh, if I get real big and muscular, people won't with me. As a lot of people, would like to have in their life, not to be with.
Yeah, that's a pretty similar path to most martial artists.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
It's
right?
actually, I would say, kind of the exact same path that a lot of martial artists have taken.
I think there's just a synergy between all sports or disciplines like that where you are improving the body. A lot of it comes from I want to be better than others so that I can either protect myself or have admiration for it.
Right. Or in your case, just not be.
Or not be fucked with.
Was that like an issue growing up?
A little bit here and there. Middle school, not so much high school. I would say I'm a pretty charismatic person, so I made a lot of friends. Funny enough, I always remember one kid in middle school named Samaj, who I used to pay $1 every day to be my bodyguard. And man, he really protected me. He f***ed up some kids. So I said, I want to be like a Samaj type individual.
All right, so you got into powerlifting kind of to not be f***ed with?
Yep.
To,
and to be strong.
Yeah, to be strong. This guy who introduced you, are you still in touch with him?
No. His name was Eric. He was in his late 40s when I met him, so that's why I was even more impressed. And I said, how long, I'd asked him how long had he been training like this? And he said, over 20 years. And I was in my early 20s at the time. I said, if he can do it for 20 plus years, it means I could. And I just saw a kind of a path for discipline, for strength, for health, later on health. Because at the time when I first started lifting, I definitely did it just to have structure to my routine and going to the gym and not just showing up and being like, oh, I'm gonna bicep curl and then use the leg press.
Nothing wrong with bicep curls.
Nothing wrong with them, but it was just, that wasn't what I was interested in. I wanted to have some sort of structure, and without that, I was just not gonna be interested in going to the gym. So after a year of training with him, I got into my first competition. He told me, you should compete, and I was against it at first, but then I did. And I had one of the best experiences of my life. Got to compete alongside a bunch of random people I'd never met before, a lot of them from the tri-state area, and made some friends that way that I even still keep in touch with today. Competed with them multiple times, have friendly rivalries. Unique thing about powerlifting is even though it's a sport and you're competing against others, most of the time you're competing against yourself and the weight on the barbell. So even though you might have a friendly rivalry with someone, or even maybe a little bit more terse than that, ultimately you're all cheering each other's successes. It's not like team sports where in basketball, you want that other team to lose because it's the only other option. If you both win, it's great. If you both lose, it sucks. If one wins and the one loses, it's a learning lesson. So I like that aspect of it, the community aspect. I wasn't expecting that when I got into it.
Yeah, I mean, that's very similar to martial arts, actually. A lot of people who are turned off by team sports, either because they're, I don't want to say selfish, but they want to be self-reliant, they don't want to rely on a teammate, or they just don't want the pressure of having to perform for somebody else. They want to show up for themselves. That is
Nothing's worse than disappointing a friend or a colleague or a teammate, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes that pressure, that disappointment, so people think, and I said selfish, and I do stand by that. I do think some elements are that it is selfish, but there's also an element of, I can't stand being a disappointment. I care so much about these other people around me that I cannot stand being a disappointment. I'll just compete on my own.
Yeah.
And so, and to go back to this, you said his name was Eric?
Yeah.
Eric. So to go back to Eric, what exactly was it that drew you to him specifically? Was it the numbers that he was putting up, or was it the physique, or?
I think it was both. At the time, I was a scrawny kid. I was like $150 wet. So I didn't know what powerlifting was. I had bench pressed sometimes. I had done some squat drills I used to sprint in college. But when I was seeing him push weight, that was like 4 plates on a barbell, like a piston, no break, just with speed and velocity. And I saw just he was just built like a shit brick house. He was just like Adonis, like anything you want in like a superhero character. It was, the physicality was there, but he also just was happy. He wasn't a dickhead. Like he approached me one time and said, "Hey, how's it going? I see you're pressing, and he just offers, he's like, do you mind if I give you advice? And I was like, sure. And it was just really easy rapport. And I found that as I got further into the powerlifting world, that most of us are pretty kind. There's not this notion of like, you get this notion of, oh, this guy must be an asshole if he lifts so much. He probably doesn't relate to what I would call like more normal people in their weightlifting or their fitness routines. But I respect it all.
Yeah, that kindness goes a long way.
Yeah,
I think everybody.
That really resonated with me.
Yeah, everybody who's introduced me to anything that has been a part of my life has been a result of somebody's kindness in one way or the other.
Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Yeah, and that misconception, I would say it's a full-on misconception. It's correct occasionally, right? Of powerlifting dickheads, bodybuilder dickheads.
For sure.
It
exists.
It exists for sure, but it's a lot more rare than people think. People think that is the norm. Like you walk into a gym and there's like this myth of like the intimidating bodybuilder, the intimidating powerlifter.
Yeah.
And I can see why. Powerlifters especially, they're always like screaming in the gym, they're taking up a lot of space.
Oh, that's another misconception. A lot of times people think they're screaming, but I don't scream when I lift.
There's some screaming.
But there are
there,
some,
though.
for sure. It's a high energy sport, and I think people who come to the gym and they want to have like a quiet yoga time routine, that's not the right place for it. If you're in a weightlifting gym where there's plates and barbells, you shouldn't expect it to be silent. It's you're exerting force on, resistance to get to the earth. Yeah, great point. Yeah. It's gonna, especially as you get towards your maximal limits, you're gonna scream. It's gonna get you whatever gets you psychologically ramped up.
Oh, for sure. Use any like smelling salts or anything?
Oh, dude, I fucking love smelling salts. I'm like addicted. It's caffeine.
Do you have it in your bag?
Oh yeah, I do. Should I show you?
Yeah. Do you want to crack?
Yeah, I can crack one up. So I got into smelling salts pretty early in my lifting career, and I've gotten much better at them. This one is Zone Smelling Salts. There's a bunch of brands now.
Do these guys sponsor you?
They do not, but
Here, do a commercial real quick over here.
Zone Smelling Salts. Take a whiff and you'll feel like a fucking madman. Woo!
I've had 300 milligrams of caffeine.
It's gonna make you awake. It's temporary though.
I'm scared.
Just tilt it into your nose. Don't get too close.
Tilt it into my nose. What does that mean?
So you can just remove the cap slightly. You don't have to fully remove it.
Okay.
And just kind of waif it in. Yeah, you can just do that.
Tilt it.
Feeling awake, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm addicted to this now. This is a part of my life. Holy shit.
It's smelling salts now. So back in the day, you use smelling salts just to wake up someone who's unconscious, right? Someone who fainted. Now that the science behind it is so advanced, oh yeah, that's the stuff. Oh, it's so good.
Okay. I forgot what I was talking about. I don't know why we said smelling salts.
We were talking about
powerlifting dickheads.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that kindness goes a long way, especially when, like you said, if you have it sounds like a little bit of insecurity. Maybe not a ton where you're afraid to step into a gym, but there's a lot of guys in the gym who are like, I just want to, get a little bit bigger, get a little bit,
for sure,
build a little bit of insecurity. I don't think people who are 100% secure in themselves start the gym without some other like health impetus. Most people who are in there, doing buys and tries on Fridays and
absolutely
doing bench press on Mondays.
You got your standard gym bros, and you got other people. For me, it was I had nothing else going on in my life. Like I had just graduated from college. I was looking for work. I had all this free time, and I was like, well, I should go to the gym because I shouldn't be a sack of shit that just plays video games all day. Although I do love video games, but it gave me like an out to do something with physical that didn't require staring at a screen. And I thought that was important to have. And even now, I think that's even more important now as I progressed in my career. I have an office job. So finishing my day at work, I look forward so much to just getting into the gym and training and being in a community of other people who are also interested in training. And I make a very big distinction between those who go to the gym and work out and versus someone who trains. Someone who trains at this point in my career in lifting, I'd rather be around because it means that they understand what they have to sacrifice or what they have to achieve in order to experience growth. Too many people work out to be fit for the summer, and I don't knock it, but for me, I'm an athlete first. Like, I'm no longer just someone who comes to the gym to work out. I train with a specific purpose to be better, to compete, to be competitive. And currently my goal is to be in the top 100 in the year when the year's out.
In the world? Top 100 in the world?
In the United States, yeah. Keeping the goals a little lower just because the world is a very big place. A lot of lifters now.
Well, I'm just curious. So you said Eric's physique, his kindness,
yep.
His numbers, obviously putting up big numbers.
And he was at the end of his career. That was an incredible thing.
Did he look like what most people think powerlifters look like?
No, absolutely
big round
not.
Belly and
at the time, so in 2015, powerlifting was just starting to get more and more popular. And Eric did not embody the typical 300, 350, 150 pound man with the rotund belly, you know, pasty skin and like dark eyes. He was actually like a Herculean type individual. He was like bronze skin, sinewy muscles, everything was proportioned well, like his biceps curved at the proper angle to my eye. I feel like I'm just like fanboying for him because
it's
at the time, like his quads, like the separation between his quad dominus and his secondary quad, it was just like incredible. He looked like a bodybuilder, but he was stronger than a bodybuilder.
Right.
And he just the way he carried himself was just, he was, to some extent, he felt like he was capable of extreme violence, but that you were put off by the fact that he was just such a sweet guy. So it's like, wow. This guy could probably strangle me easily, no problem. Eyes closed, like half asleep. But then you talk to him and it's just like casual conversation. It's like, I want to be like that. I admired that.
Did he train you for your first competition?
He didn't actually. Unfortunately, shortly after I had met him, like within a year, he was a superintendent in the building in the neighborhood I grew up in, and he was involved in a fire. There was a boiler fire, and he actually had to. This is how fucking badass this man is. His wife, and he had 3 kids at the time, he was in the boiler room, he was locked in, the door had shut. He climbed in through the air duct to get out and scalded, from what I heard, 3rd degree and 2nd degree burns on his elbows, arms and forearms, shins, knees. He was hospitalized. At the time, I wasn't in the country. And when I came back, I had learned that he had moved, like he had given up his position and he had moved to New Jersey. So I actually never kept in touch with him again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Pretty sad.
I don't want to be callous here, but it's a good thing you spent all that time in the gym.
Yeah. And just his mentality that he wasn't giving up on life.
Right.
So I think his physicality really helped him survive the trauma of the injuries. And from my understanding now, he does well in New Jersey. I haven't been able to keep in touch because I lost his phone number, unfortunately. But
well, okay, so then how did you train for your first competition?
I trained using YouTube and just I found the program that I liked. Funny enough, talking about the stereotypical powerlifter, I did follow a stereotypical powerlifter. His name was Brandon Lilly. Brandon Lilly was from the West Side School of Powerlifting, which is Louis Simmons. A lot of folks that don't know. Yeah, West Side Barbell, yeah. So he was one of those prodigal sons of that program. And he made his own powerlifting program that was free on the internet at the time. And I just found the PDF version of it, studied it, read it, and I implemented it with some caveats. I changed some of the programming to fit my needs or what I felt were my needs at the time. And initially I did pretty well. I used to compete. I put on about 15 pounds of muscle in that first year. And then I competed in my first competition in November of 2015. I'm sorry. No, it was April of 2015. And I had I think it was a 1,200 pound total at 165. So that would mean I squatted 400 pounds in my first meet, bench pressed like 280 pounds, and deadlifted 540.
So deadlift was your best event?
Oh yeah, that was my, in powerlifting they often talk about people having specialties.
Yeah.
I definitely had the specialty of a deadlifter. A lot of that has to do with your anatomically, what your leverages are. But I also just had a strong back naturally.
Okay.
I think I got that from my mom's side of the family. So I always loved deadlifting over bench pressing and or squatting. You can see I have very long arms relative for bench pressing, and the range of motion matters a lot as your leverages or your appendages collapse in space. So having longer arms is a detriment versus someone who might have dinosaur T-Rex arms. They get to have a shorter range of motion. Yeah, you might be a little bit better on bench than I would.
Yeah, and plus all the bicep curls helped a lot.
Oh yeah.
What were the changes that you made to that program?
So instead of, it was very squat dominant and bench dominant. And I didn't like that because I really enjoyed the deadlift. And I said, well, if I don't practice the deadlift enough and it's only once a week, then it's not going to be helpful to me. So I added an extra deadlift day. And what I ended up doing was, the programming didn't call for this, but I ended up making every training session had a primary and a secondary movement. And what I mean by that is I would do whatever the programming said for that day. Let's say it was a squat day. But then I would also make sure to do a lighter bench press or lighter deadlift on the same day, which, as you can imagine, is fucking extremely taxing. Like, you're exhausted. But I was a psychopath, and I loved the feeling of pure exhaustion at the end of training, going to eat and just being so mellowed out that like nothing fazed me. I could be presented with some of the worst news possible, and I'd be like, damn, that's terrible. And in that moment, I would not care because I'd be so relaxed.
So it was like a sense of accomplishment each workout.
Yes.
Not just the competition.
Yeah. And this was before, the sport really blew up in 2017, 2018. So the first 2 years, I didn't know how other people were training. I didn't know much. Like, there was no consolidated ranking system on the internet yet. That came a few years later. And I started doing, I competed in my first federation. It's called Revolution Powerlifting Syndicate. They're still around, but they're a small venue. They're mom and pop type event, and they only host a few meets in this area a year. There were larger federations that had a much more diverse talent pool. So when I first stepped on the platform, as they call it in powerlifting, to compete at a more prestigious or more accomplished federation, I realized, holy shit, I'm actually not as strong as I thought I was. And that gave me more impetus to train better, to learn more, to become a better lifter.
Yeah, that would be the opposite for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Where they get to, you see this in martial arts a lot. People are just crushing local tournaments. They get to the national level and they do okay, and then when they get to the world stage, and they're used to being the best guy in their school, their region, their state, maybe even their country in a certain way. You see it in the Olympics. And when they encounter that, usually by the time they encounter it, they've encountered something like this every now and then or occasionally along the way. But sometimes that epiphany that you are not as good as you thought you were. You are not on the world stage as you once thought you were. And you have a lot of work to do.
Oh yeah.
And especially if you've put in a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
That can be very daunting, and people tend to quit. A lot of people quit during that first shocking moment where you're like, all right, well, I'm going from Revolution Federation to, USPA or something like that. And you're just like, oh, I qualified for this, but I don't know if I'm qualified for this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it turns a lot of people away.
It was daunting for me, but I think after 2 years of powerlifting and competing, I actually suffered my first catastrophic injury. And I realized that if I quit now, I'd probably lose all the gains I had and then some, and probably just some focus and just having some discipline. Like, I would have been a quitter, and I don't like to quit. In 2017, I had a lower back injury after training. It was a lower L5, L4 disc extrusion. And basically what ended up happening is on my lower back, the disc on my low back, they both ruptured on the left-hand side. So if you're looking down, bird's eye view, so left-hand side facing outwards, and spinal fluid actually was leaking into nerves on my backside. And I went to an orthopedic doctor, got an MRI, and they were like, look, this is a pretty severe injury. We advise that you don't lift anymore. You have a couple options. You could either do a cortisone shot directly into the spine. We could do a spinal fusion surgery if you don't have, if you feel like the pain isn't alleviating. And at the time, to give you a sense of what that pain was, it was just constant radiating pain down the left side of my leg, my glute, my quad, my hamstring, my foot. And I had such limited range of motion, I couldn't move my left leg past here. So I hobbled for like a month. And then the last option they gave me was just PT. And I said, well, fuck the first two. I'm doing PT. I'm going to get myself better. This is bullshit. Like, I can come back from this. And I had some good information from YouTube. At this point now, this is 2017. Powerlifting has gotten a little bit bigger. There are people opening up channels, opening up their training.
fucking helicopter. So you were telling us about your back injury, your lower back injury. You had 2 ruptured discs.
Yeah, 2 ruptured discs. I ended up doing PT for 4 months. Great nurse practitioner helped me get back to speed, and she really believed that I could get back to competing. And she said, if you do what I ask you to do, and we assess this right, and we take our time, you can be back on the platform. And I forget her name now, but I'm extremely grateful to her.
Did she have an athletic background?
She was a volleyball player,
yeah,
and that helped a lot. Yeah. And I think that she admired. Funny enough, just a quick side note, I think she admired the fact that I was so tenacious in getting back and doing everything that she said. And I went to a hospital in New York City, Weill Cornell, and most of the population she dealt with were these older geriatric individuals. And she said I was her best patient simply because I followed her instructions and did the homework. Yeah. So I improved in a few short months, whereas she had patients she had been seeing for over a year. And she's like, I'm just grateful you listened.
Yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah, I'm probably guilty of that. Did you do your stretches?
Yeah, sure.
Every day.
And your voice your pitches rise, and they're like, you didn't do your stretches. You're like, no, I did. Yeah.
Were the doctors initially transparent with you about what cortisone would do? What kind of...
Yeah, they told me it would alleviate the pain for a little bit. I didn't like the doctors, really. There was one orthopedic doctor who was very kind, and he was very... He didn't like to speak in absolutes, so I appreciated him. But the other ones that did my MRIs were like, you're probably not going to lift anymore. You should quit that and find something else, swimming or whatever. And I was like, you guys can go blow it out your ass. Yeah. So fast forward 4 months, and I got better. I got my range of motion back, and I started barbell lifting again. And funny enough, I got stronger. In powerlifting, you often use different implements while you're lifting, and those implements are wrist wraps, a belt. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're made out of Velcro, sometimes they're made out of leather. There's different materials, and knee sleeves. I had never lifted in any of that. I used a belt before my injury and wrist wraps for my wrists, just on the heaviest bench press or maybe even squat. But I was kind of a purist in the sense that I wanted my body to be the strongest it could be. So basically after this injury, I just wanted to be the fucking strongest my body could be, and I wanted to do it on my own terms where I didn't have something assisting me. It wasn't a knee, it wasn't getting a rebound in the knee. So to that end, it became more of a health. Powerlifting became a nexus point to being healthier. It became less about competing, still important to compete, but also about just improving my quality of life. And I realized that just building your strength, and I was doing research just on the internet, just building your strength will prevent you from basic things in life, like falling on your ass, when you're older and you can't get up. Well, if you lift and you have strong hips and strong glutes and strong arms, you'll never fall. Or if you do, you'll pop right back up. Yeah. And living in New York City, I grew up around a lot of older folks that always seemed to amble about, and they always seemed like the wind would push them over. So I said to myself, if I'm going to end up being here for long term, which I hope I'm not, but long term, then I want to be physically strong enough that I can get around and walk at a good pace like every New Yorker does. The New York walk is a very real thing. Yeah. I'm sure you've never lost it.
No. But I did notice, now that I don't live in New York anymore, that no matter what speed a New Yorker is walking at, they're the only person who is walking at the right speed. Yeah. Everybody else is either too slow or too fast. Like if I blow past someone who's walking leisurely, they're like, what the fuck is this guy in a rush for? And if they're late and they're trying to walk past me and I'm walking at normal pace, they're pissed off at me because they're late. There's no right answer here.
There's no right answer.
Everybody else is wrong. You're the only person who's walking at the right pace.
Yeah. So to tie this back into being competitive, even when I learned, after my injury, I got back and I saw I had to take, a year and a half off from competing. And when I got back, the scene changed so much. There were fucking 18-year-olds coming in. At that point, I put on some more weight, so I was in the 170s. I compete at the 181-pound class. I guess that would be your type, closest to middleweight. Okay. In MMA, right? I think.
185.
185, yeah. And there were 18-year-old kids that were fucking squatting mid 500s, 550, bench pressing 3 and change, and deadlifting well into the 600s. And I was like, they're 18? And I found out that in that time that I had gotten out of the sport, at least the competitive side of it, there was just an explosion of exposure. And even now, the numbers I put up, while impressive, are not elite. They're above average. But I just try to keep up with the Joneses now, as they say.
How much do you think that is in the growth of the sport?
Oh my God.
Like just because other people do it, right? There's a phenomenon that happens when if one person achieves a physical feat, all of a sudden that physical feat is super accessible to people all over the world.
You know, in the last 10 years, I just think the sports science has gotten so much better.
Okay.
Like you even see it in MMA, right? You used to have, you know, look at the beginning of the UFC.
Yeah.
You would have fighters come in and they were in their narrow discipline. They were either Taekwondo as a striker, or they were jiu-jitsu, so they just grappled, or they'd be, you know, karate, or one of those disciplines. They were not well-rounded.
Okay.
And then as the sport progressed, you had people who became multifaceted. You had, you know, someone who's a boxer was also a brown belt or maybe even a low-level black belt in jiu-jitsu, and you're like, whoa, that's hard. That's a lot of dedication to the sport to be a master boxer and a master jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Oh yeah.
And I think the same happened in powerlifting, but what was different about powerlifting was powerlifting started in the 70s and 80s, really, the competitive side of it. And it was a lot of bodybuilders, and if they weren't bodybuilders, just like fitness enthusiasts that didn't really know how to eat well, how to build a training protocol or program. And in 2020, let's say just in 2020, like the sports science has gotten to the point where you had a lot of what would be professional athletes suffer an injury in baseball and basketball and football. And they said, damn, I still have this competitive spirit in me. What can I do that won't aggravate this injury I had that might occur from a contact sport?
Right.
Powerlifting is a non-contact sport. So if you can learn how to brace and you can learn how to move through space spatially and understand how your body moves through it and build muscle, right? You know, build that fast twitch muscle and the slow twitch muscle, then you could compete in this sport. It doesn't require much equipment, and as you don't have to worry about what another being is going to do to you, especially at speed. You know, the velocity of another 300-pound man, let's say a linebacker, you're a running back, crashing into you over and over again, then you can heal up from that. You never have to worry about, oh shit, is this person going to truck me? Or, you know, have the fear of someone behind you hitting you from behind. In powerlifting, all the variables are known. It's all internal.
Right.
So I think a lot of D1 athletes, even D2 athletes, any athletes got out of their discipline for whatever the reason was, usually injury related, and got into the sport because it was an easy nexus point. Every gym has a barbell, every gym has weights, every gym has people who like to lift weights. And now with the internet and YouTube and coaching and programming from even remote settings, you no longer have to be in a place where I had an Eric. You can go online and find your favorite coach or influencer and say, hey, I want to train with your team. How do I sign up? And then they coach you through video, or you send videos to them.
Yeah.
So I think the internet of things really kind of blew up the sport in that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's built a lot of great martial artists.
Yeah.
Like a lot of great martial artists were former track guys, former football guys who were either injured or just couldn't keep up at the higher levels. They get picked up for pro, and just, you know, focused all that discipline, that energy, that drive into a different sport.
Yes,
martial arts is very accessible. Powerlifting is accessible. Bodybuilding a little less so.
Yeah.
But have you always been disciplined? Did you say?
Ooh, I want to say I've always been stubborn.
Okay. What's the distinction between stubborn and disciplined?
I think being stubborn is it's like you have to set your mind on something and then say, this is the goal I'm going to achieve, and never quit. And like I said earlier, I don't like quitting when I set my mind to do something. I've quit on things that I wasn't wholeheartedly interested in. Well, with powerlifting, I want to get stronger. I started off wanting to be the best, but I'm also rational, right? Like I don't know what my limit is right now. I've always pushed past my limits. Right now I compete at 181 pounds, and I've gotten older. I'm now about to be 34 years old, but I'm stronger now than I was 5 years ago, which is incredible to think about when you know. So to the extent that I'm able to, I will keep pushing past my limits. But I do know that there are younger guys I train with even now that their potential is way higher than mine for various reasons. You know, maybe they have been playing sports since they were a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I might have the discipline now because of my stubbornness to pursue this sport as a competitor and to try to be a high-level competitor. But a lot of the kids and a lot of the people who are coming in now, just the genetic propensity that they have, you know, some people are just strong as fuck. It's in their blood.
Yeah, short femurs.
Yeah, that all plays a part. You know, one of my, I was gonna say colleague, but one of my gym mates, his name is Zach. Shout out to Zach Disconstanza? Sorry if I butchered your name, bro. He's 165 pounds. He played rugby. Before that, he was always athletic, played baseball. He's like 5'6", and he has the perfect proportions for powerlifting. The guy is 165 pounds that can back squat 600 pounds for a double. Casually. That's not even his best lift. That's not even his best lift. It's not even his strongest. So when I meet people like that, and he's ranked like number 10 in the entire world in our sport. So I'm around that and I look at that and I'm like, yeah, there's no way I could be like that. But I can aspire to it.
Right.
I can continue to build with my discipline and become stronger.
Right.
And I have. I've added, in the last year, I've added 88 pounds to my overall total. I'm on my way towards getting a 1,500 pound total in the sub 200 class, which is respectable now.
Sure.
When I first got into the sport, that was like top elite. I would be like top 25. But now, like I said, there's so many people that it's just, the pool has gotten so much bigger that now I'm like, if I can achieve my goal of being in the top 100 by the end of this year, that's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, in the United States, not even the world, just the United States, to be that competitive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a theory in MMA as well where, yes, the sport has grown and is more accessible for people to get good at all facets of martial arts, but also people who would have been in the NBA are now doing MMA instead. People who would have been in the NFL are probably powerlifting instead. Rugby guys are powerlifting instead. And so you get these elite athletes with just genetic gifts who are now in what people would say is the right sport for them.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, powerlifting definitely has a type. There's definitely a type that
for sure
is good at powerlifting.
Yeah, yeah.
And martial arts not so much. But yeah, I think those guys, you know, because it's blown up, people who are built for the sport now found the sport.
Yes.
And they're the ones that are setting those.
They're setting new
records.
They're setting new limits. You know, like it used to be. If you were in my weight class, 181, a few years ago, not even that long ago, 2018, if you squatted 600 pounds, that was like a top 10, top 15 level squat, like in the world. Yeah. Now that's something that a weight class even lighter, like my friend Zach does. And those guys at my weight class, they squat 700.
Yeah.
I haven't even touched, to give you a sense, my best squat is 540. So I'm like, damn, how am I gonna add 150 pounds to my squat? And you look at these guys, and they're built like bodybuilders. Like they have the same aesthetics, but they're just stronger than bodybuilders because of the way that they train. So their muscles are built through repetition, but through a movement rather than exercise specific like curls. You know, hypertrophy. Exactly.
I don't actually know how to pronounce that word.
Hypertrophy. Yeah, that's
hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Your stubbornness led to your discipline.
Yes.
But did you follow through with your first powerlifting program?
I did for a while, and then I realized that I was stagnating, and I said to myself, okay, I need to change it up. I don't know what it is, but I need to change it up. So I still wasn't invested in the sport. I didn't make enough money to really spend on a coach. I didn't make enough money to invest nutritionally the way I wanted to or pay for programming. So I found another program, Johnny Candido, another famous powerlifter. He's been around for a while, and he had a free program, which at the time was already 7 years old. It was just like on an Excel sheet, and that program was fucking nuts. It was like you squatted 3 times a week and you were doing 100 reps at 80%, which for me was like 400 pounds at the time, and I would just be always shot. My system was just completely shot. And it worked well for the first year and a half that I did it. And I added another 100 pounds to my total. I took my total from 1,300 to 1,400. And then after that, I said, okay, there's diminishing returns. Like I'm not able to break this next plateau. What do I have to do? And then around that time, I found my current gym. And to give you a sense of how powerlifting has progressed in New York City in particular, there was never a real powerlifting gym. I trained at commercial gyms. I trained on whatever equipment was fucking available. It'd be a warped barbell on a floor that was not leveled, which meant that like I had to figure out novel ways to train so I didn't injure myself just based on environmental factors. I never had racks that were appropriate to my height, so I always had to like stand on a plate or go on my tiptoes. And if you're a powerlifter, you know that that's just a terrible position to start from. So in October of last year, JDI Barbell opened up a second location. They had been in Harlem for about 2 years now during the pandemic, maybe 3 years at that point. And I was so ecstatic because I walked into this facility and I felt like I was at home. They had the combo racks I needed, calibrated plates, all the accessory training equipment that would help keep my back and my hamstrings and my quads in shape. I was always like in pain or injured at max effort squats or deadlifts, and I would just have to take days off from training because I didn't have a way to alleviate that. Using a sauna didn't work, but now I use something called a reverse hyper and a Nordic curl, and that really keeps my low back from getting compressed and keeping my spine from being compressed. And speaking of the injury, I also just learned life habits that made myself better. Like I learned that I slouched at work on one side, and apparently the injury that I sustained was developed in part by just the shearing effect of having poor posture at work and then going to the gym and having this ramrod spine. So the disc just kept rubbing and then it eventually ruptured, and I had no idea why. It turned out it wasn't my training, it was just how I was living and how I was moving through space. So now I'm so mindful, even how I stand now, I try to be mindful about how I plant my feet. You know, I'm not all on my toes and or on the heel of my foot. I'm very balanced, and I always go through my inventory in the morning when I wake up, stretch my toes, and I assess how my body's feeling. And I think that's a beautiful thing, that while I do compete in a sport and I do consider myself an athlete, the benefits of powerlifting in my life and my health have been phenomenal. Like I can't believe that I just kind of happened to fall into this just because I saw this one guy named Eric at the gym who for different reasons at the time impressed me. But ultimately, I realize now that he probably lived this lifestyle that I live. It's a little more austere, but like he took care of his body, he made sure he slept well, he made sure he ate well, and as a result, his body gave him what he wanted, which was to be fucking strong as hell. And
awesome.
Yeah,
let's readjust the cameras here.
Yeah.
So before we left off, you mentioned, you know, you're kind of emulating, or you fell into whatever you think Eric's lifestyle was probably like when he was powerlifting. And a big thing in martial arts is coaching. You can't get your black belt in a lot of gyms and a lot of disciplines unless you've coached, unless you've taught, unless you've contributed to the community.
I'm a huge proponent of that. I love my community, and I realize that you got to give it back in some way, right? And for years I've always taken, but I try to give where I can, whether that might be just instruction to someone who's, you know, a novice in lifting, and I'll look at their movement and assess it and say, have you tried this? Have you tried, you know, positioning yourself in this way or bracing in this way? And I've taken a lot of enjoyment in that, but it wasn't until I joined the JDI community that I realized that I had people really looking up to me because they saw the discipline in which I approached weightlifting. And I think they were very impressed because, as I mentioned earlier, I compete as a raw lifter, which simply means I use the minimal amount of equipment possible.
What's the minimal amount of equipment?
Not using any at all.
Really?
Just wearing a singlet and going on there. No sleeves, I've always competed that way. Like I said, I always wanted to be the strongest I could be, and I felt that wearing sleeves or knee wraps, which are basically give you a rebound effect, and in the squat, or wearing a suit, you know, there's equipped lifting, which we didn't get into. That's a whole other topic. I just wanted to be as fucking strong as I could be and make my body a piece of steel, basically.
No belt?
No belt, yeah. After my injury, it was funny. I felt like I tried with the belt and it was pinching me, and I have a very short torso. Like my rib cage ends right here and my hip is right here. We're talking about like 4 inches. So wearing a belt just felt weird to me, and it was always pinching me. It's like a squirrel or something in there. Or skunk. Who knows?
So are you, when you're teaching novice lifters, are you doing that in a formal setting? Are you a formal coach, or is this informal?
No, it's informal for now, but I actually just started taking a coaching course with the owner of my gym. He is a certified strength and conditioning specialist who has like over a decade of experience actually coaching being a strength and conditioning trainer for D2 athletes at a college in the Midwest. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but he brings with him a plethora of experience that I think is so unique because he got to watch the evolution of weightlifting and powerlifting. At my gym, they also have we have a weightlifting community where I hope to learn a little bit about the snatch, the clean and jerk. I've always admired that, but that shit scares the hell out of me. If you ever seen Olympic weightlifting, these are guys and girls that are constantly screaming, lifting weights up with velocity and shoving them above their heads in such a violent manner that I always thought that their elbows or their shoulders would pop off like Mr. Potato Head. And I just told myself, if I did that, I know I'd fuck up. And I don't want to fuck up. So powerlifting is everything's about tight, controlled movement, and I like that.
Well,
that's how I operate in my life. I try to be like thoughtful and move through space or plan something with intent, not just, all right, throw it up and pray, you know?
Well, I'm trying to get into Olympic lifting actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
It is a little bit, let's say, it's as technical as powerlifting.
Yeah, I would say more so.
But the technique is more imperative, but the consequences aren't as grave because the
so?
weights aren't the same.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not, you know, these guys can probably deadlift 600. They could probably squat 7, 8, but they're not snatching 7 or 8.
That's true.
Snatching 225, snatching 315 maybe.
Yeah.
And that's so because the weight is lower, it's necessarily lower consequence. The technique is, you know, is as important as powerlifting.
Sure.
But and I'm not an Olympic lifter. I'm just dabbling right now.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to striking.
Interesting.
So like powerlifting is a lot what I would say bodybuilding, powerlifting, but more powerlifting is a lot like grappling.
Oh yeah.
And it's a lot of isometric strength. You gotta hold somebody, move them, and keep constant tension throughout each movement. If you don't, you're fucked.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And in striking, there's something. I don't know who coined this term. I want to say it was Robin Black, but I love this term, and I think it's a super apt analogy, or a super good way to describe this motion. It's the double pulse neurology, in that you're tense to extend, you're relaxed on your way out, and then you're tense at the end. And that is kind of more Olympic lifting. You know?
That makes complete sense to me.
You're exploding at the bottom.
Yes.
You're exploding to catch.
Yeah.
And you can see they kind of almost have like a relaxed.
But in that in-between time,
yeah.
it's a flow.
It's a flow, yeah,
it's
exactly.
A flow.
That bar, because they're not lifting the bar, they're throwing the bar.
They're throwing it, yeah.
And then catching it.
I've always admired, it's beautiful to watch, really.
And that double pulse neurology is there for Olympic lifting. You know, and not so many Olympic lifting injuries. I mean, they're there for sure, but I mean, every powerlifter has some kind of injury, right?
Well, that's true, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that poor training, and that's why I want to throw my hat in the ring with coaching, because I feel like the way I train, you can't fuck around. Because I don't use a belt, because I don't use sleeves, a lot of my training is intuitive based, so I don't push myself if I feel that my body isn't ready in that day for a max effort, because then I'll just get injured, and then it's not worthwhile. Then I'm set back for, you know, months, you know, the worst case scenario. So a lot of my training is built around establishing a strong foundation so that you're set up, you can't set yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
You are gonna be at peak week where you need to be. If you feel you're not gonna make it, it's psychological, it's not physical. And so much of MMA and weightlifting and powerlifting it's a mental sport. You know, you have to have, you mentioned earlier that it takes a certain kind of individual to powerlift. That's absolutely true. A lot of it's just pain, right? But it's managing pain.
Yeah.
So is MMA. Training is pain. Cutting is pain, you know, during your camp. Getting to the final part of it, you know, getting it all together and getting into the ring is not the most painful part, at least from my perspective as a non-MMA combatant, you know. It's the camp itself, you know, and all the mental strain you go through and thinking, am I ready? Am I ready? Am I going to be better than my opponent? Am I going to have just that extra step, that extra speed, that extra reaction that he's not going to have? If I trained enough and knowing their specific proclivities, hopefully, you know what your opponent's good at or not good at. In powerlifting, you don't have that as much, except it's against yourself. It's about how much belief do you have in yourself, you know, in conjunction with training appropriately. So you could hit a weight in training every single day. You get on the platform, you're nervous for some reason, maybe your family's out in the audience watching, or you saw someone else just hit a big lift that is your best, and you're like, shit, I can't do that. And you get under the bar and you have that kernel of doubt, you better believe you're probably gonna fail that lift. And it's not gonna be because you weren't strong enough. It's gonna be because you doubt it yourself.
Awesome. Well, I hope I could train with you pretty soon. Maybe coach me through a couple of power lifts I haven't done in 6 years.
Yeah,
I'm
why not?
looking forward to it. Hey, let me bring this back to a statement you made earlier.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, but I couldn't find a way to end, so I'm just going to say it here. You said you had a strong back because of your mother.
Oh yeah,
and your
my mother's.
What is your background? What is your ethnic background?
Oh yeah,
contributes to your strong back.
I Dominican and Irish. So.
And your mother is?
My mother's from the Dominican Republic, and funny enough, my sister did an ancestry. I refused to do that thing, but now it's there, and now the government and everyone else knows all about my bloodline. But apparently, I had I have Cambodian blood and Trinidad and Tobago, like 10%. So a lot of island, Caribbean. And so I think that mixture of people from the Caribbean that often worked in farm labor intensive activities. Like my grandfather was a farmer all his life.
All right.
Like he he had thick hands. On my mother's side, he had thick hands and a strong back because just for 40 plus years of his life, that's what he did. He grew coffee and he grew rice and potatoes.
Great food in the islands.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's another key to my strength. I think that, and I think I lived in a 5-story walk-up growing up, so I always ran up and down stairs. So I think that built up my muscles in a way that most kids don't get to experience living in New York City.
That's your version of the farmer's carry.
Yeah. I used to run up the stairs.
Middle school backpack up the stairs.
Dude, Wagner was as you remember, that was an experience. It was like wearing a weighted vest every day, and then running to school to make class, and then coming back and running up my 5 flights. So I did 10 flights of stairs every day minimum.
Now I'm thinking about island food. I was drawn to powerlifting just because of my background, where we kind of dabble in all types of fitness, all types of fighting.
Yeah.
And I was drawn to powerlifting initially. I didn't get to compete or anywhere near the numbers that you're putting up. But the thing that really pulled me in was I didn't have to diet.
Oh yeah,
and I know at the highest levels, of course, you have to watch your diet. And, you know, when you get to our age, you have to watch your diet no matter what. But don't let me down here, Chris.
Yeah.
What is your best powerlifting meal?
Ooh. So my favorite go-to, if I had to pick a go-to, is, and I did this actually right before my second to last comp. I had baked chicken, rice and beans, some sweet plantain, and something called a limonana, which is basically just a island version of lemonade. It's made with lime, a little bit of sugar and water. And that shit hit so well. It was so good. The reason I like that meal is you get the carbohydrates from the rice, a little bit of protein from the beans. The beans flavor the rice, you pour them on top. And the baked chicken, if you get a salsa, it's usually a tomato-based salsa. It's not like Mexican salsa where it's spicy. It just adds more. If you make the baked chicken right, it's already juicy. And the tomato sauce just adds a little more acidity to it. So I would always eat like baked chicken breasts. And I love that because it gave me the energy I needed without the bloat that you would get from like a hamburger or something like that.
Who's making this chicken?
Oh, it's usually like a Dominican spot. Like in my neighborhood, I'm close to Washington Heights, so there's a bunch of Dominican restaurants near me. If not, when I was younger, my mom would make my meal.
Sweet plantains or starchy plantains?
Ooh, I like sweet. But starchy would be better on a regular basis. Like my powerlifters are really boring when it gets down to eating because we want food that's easy to digest and easy to prep. So my go-to meals generally, when I'm not my comp meal, but my go-to meal generally will be, it'll be pasta, it'll be some sort of carbohydrate, pasta, sweet potato, or rice, and then the protein would either be like a ground beef or a ground turkey or chicken. You know, breast of chicken, usually ground because it's easier to store and save. And then I'd make a salad. That's just me though. A lot of powerlifters don't do that.
Do you bring the bowl of rice and chicken with you in the gym?
No, actually, but I'll pack it. I do bring a bowl to work. So, because I work in an office all day, I'll usually get a breakfast meal, and I eat eggs every day. I don't know what I'd do without eggs, to be honest.
I'm always jealous of those powerlifters who are just like eating on the bench press.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. That does happen in my gym. Sometimes I'll have what they call an intra workout meal or intra workout snack. So it might be just like a Care bar, or I forget what they call them, Cliff Bar. Yeah, or something like that. But generally, I just try to eat a fuck ton before I go and train, and usually 2 hours before. That way, it actually hits my system and I have the energy. But pro tip and crucial, if you were ever going to continue your strength training, the meals you have the day before influence directly how your training goes the following day. So you could have a great meal the morning of and lunch if you train in the evening, but if you had a poor meal the day before, your energy level is going to be way less than it should be. So you always train and eat and prepare the way that you want the day before you hit a big number.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, you already trained today?
I did already train today.
All right. Well, let's get you fueled up for tomorrow's workout, I guess.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Yo quiero 2 órdenes 2 órdenes de medio pollo blanco con arroz blanco, habichuelas rojo y plátanos. Sí. Y yo quiero una limonada y él quiere un presidente.
Why chicken?
Why chicken?
Yeah, I thought powerlifters wanted like maximum calories.
I eat the chicken, it's cleaner and it lets me digest it faster and more easily. And so after I make weight, my tradition had always been to go to Pizza Hut and get a double crust stuffed pizza with chicken on top of it, and I'd have like half a pie of that. And that would get me carved up, and I'd be bloated as fuck. But I loved it, and it made me happy because I'd be depriving myself of that for like 2 weeks.
So Pizza Hut over New York City style pizza?
In that instance, yes. It's literally just lemon. You can see it has a slightly different color than most lemonades. It's a little dark because it's made of lime as opposed to lemons. It's good. You want to try it?
Yeah.
I love it. That's what I grew up drinking.
Yeah, it's a little bit more bitter than lemonade. So kind of moving away from food. You competed a year after starting powerlifting. How much of an effect do you think that competing had on your progress?
A huge impact. It gave me goals. So my first competition, I had no goals. I just was told I should compete, signed up for a meet, and I just put up numbers. I had no guidance, no coaching, in the sport we have a lot of the top end guys, or even the not top 1%, but even just anyone who takes it seriously, hires a coach, maybe hires a nutritionist, and has what they call a handler. Your handler could be your coach. It could also just be a friend of yours that you just trust.
Okay.
And the point of a handler is they take away all the stress of figuring out what number should I be putting up today? What does it look like? So ideally your handler is someone who's seen you in training, maybe a training partner, maybe it's your coach, and they'll see your first attempt on squat. Well, actually, you know what? Let me back up. For those who don't know, powerlifting competitions are broken down to three sections, 3 sessions. They are the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and it's always performed in that order. You never start with the deadlift in a competition and then work your back way to squat.
Squat, bench, deadlift.
Yes, and within each session, you would have 3 attempts at hitting your lifts, and normally you would pick on your opener, your first attempt, you pick a weight that you've hit in training on any given day. It's comfortable, it's easy, it's not going to strain your central nervous system. Something you can probably do for 5 reps casually. That's your opener. Your second attempt normally is something that is probably 90% of your power.
Okay.
You know, maybe something you can do for a double on a good day, but normally you probably just do it once. And then on your third attempt, that's either when you're training to hit a PR, personal record, or personal best. It's usually a number you've never hit before, or for some people, it might be a number that they've matched in the gym, but they wanted to do it on a platform where it'd be recorded and used as a metric against others who've competed.
Okay.
Gym lifts to me mean nothing. Gym lifts are great in training to get you a sense of how you would do in competition, but they're not the competition setting. Depending on the federation you compete in, you might have a 2-hour weigh-in, which I fucking hated. I never do 2-hour weigh-ins. In MMA, I know you get 24 hours.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
A little more than that, yeah.
A little more than that, yeah. For me, I like the 24-hour weigh-in as well, so I can do what I call a recomp or recomposition. So if I'm cutting weight, I get the 24 hours to feed myself, rehydrate and whatnot, like a fighter would.
Yeah.
Because fighters generally walk around 10 pounds or more heavier than they would when they fight. I think that's normal, and I think in powerlifting, there's a similar dynamic as well. So anyway, going back to competition. On competition day, you got the 3 disciplines, the 3 sessions, squat, bench, deadlift, 3 attempts, as I described to you.
Yeah.
And they move in that order. And there's a lot to be mindful of in the competition, because let's say your opener, you move up and it doesn't feel good. If you have a handler, they should be able to see that and reassess what your second attempt is. You should always have a plan A, plan B, plan C. You know, when you go into competition day, you have no idea how you slept, you know, all these variables that maybe in your training, you know, you could control for, but now, let's say you traveled, you're in a hotel, let's say there's a dog next door in the room next door and it's barking all night, keeps you awake, or you forgot your pre-workout, so now you're starting the competition without that.
You don't have the smelling salts.
You don't have the smelling salts. Yeah, all those things can function. Those are variables. So you want to have someone who is familiar with your training protocols and can see when you're struggling or when you're doing above expectation. Maybe you did a great opener and they're like, oh, let's go for the PR on the second attempt. And that way we have an option to decline. We can, if it doesn't work, then we stay at that same weight, or maybe we just scratch that lift and conserve energy
and
for
it's
the
still
rest.
Your best lift.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I think when it comes to competing in my sport, so much of it is mental. And someone in the gym can hit a PR amongst their friends and their coach, you know, fully fed, fully rested, you know, in that environment that they're safe and comfortable in, or they feel safe, you know, feel familiar with. Right. And then on the platform, you're surrounded by a bunch of other people you don't know.
Yeah.
You're organized into flights. You might have 5 minutes between attempts. You might have 20 minutes between attempts. Most meets run anywhere between 3 and like 8 hours, depending on how many lifters there are and how many platforms are available and how the coaching and the spotters and loaders go. So you have to learn the pace of a meet. And I always tell I tell a lifter when it's their first time competing to not have any kind of sense of, oh, these are the numbers I must hit. No, you just want to get used. You want to have your feet wet. You want to enjoy it. You don't want it to become a stressful situation.
Right.
And then you build off that first performance. So that by the time you're like me and you're like 10 meets in, it's secondary. Like, you know what you have to do. You know the mental state you need to be in before each lift. How much of a mental amp you need to have in order to hit these lifts. Or maybe just you learn within the first hour all the stimuli you're going to be dealing with that you wouldn't have in your gym setting, and learn how to adapt. Like, what am I going to do? Like you mentioned earlier, because of the nature of your work, like, you're very cognizant of people moving around and distracts you. So maybe you need to focus on, maybe you set up and you close your eyes when you get under the barbell, because when you're lifting, you don't need to see what you're doing. You just need to feel what you're doing. So that's a cue that could be trained to someone who might suffer anxiety. I see all these people, there's 100 spectators, they're cheering at me, and like, it's exciting, but it's also making me nervous, so close your eyes.
Right, yeah, that pressure will get you. That pressure gets a lot of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because, like I said, meets can be 3 to 8 hours, but the cumulative time that you're under bar, under the load, is going to be like 3 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of amp and a lot of explosive power to be produced in a specific time when they tell you that you're up, not when you want.
Right.
And so those factors really play into what I think the difference between someone who casually powerlifts, you know, and someone who's a competitive powerlifter. I draw that distinction between an athlete and a non-athlete. You can practice my discipline, but you're not an athlete until you decide to put that on a platform where it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be what you're used to. There's going to be that unknown factor.
That performance matters.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's not just your ability, it's your ability to perform.
Correct. Absolutely. Oh yeah. So just to give you a sense of the spread, I know we discussed earlier, one of my go-to meals before competition is Dominican food.
Yeah.
I grew up in a Dominican household, and this is a prime example of a classic meal. We got, in Spanish, arroz blanco, or white rice, habichuelas rojo, which means red beans, plantain maduro, which means sweet plantain, and then pollo medio de blanco, which is just half a breast half a breast white meat chicken. I hope you enjoy.
I will. Thank you very much.
That's true. Guys, please enjoy. This is a different salsa. Let's see what this one. Oh yeah. Pro tip: you put there you go. You know how it goes. Gotta put that rice right, the beans right on that rice. There you go. Enjoy. Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I'm glad you're enjoying. Zone smelling salts. Take a whiff and you'll feel like a fucking madman.